some from the audience that have been passed up. And this question is for Mr. Roberti. 2 weeks ago, the Vice President of China visited the United States. Topics included the U.S. trade deficit with China, China's loosening control of its currency, human rights dissenters, and minority rights. China and the U.S. are among the world's largest economic powers. How would you manage this relationship?
It needs to be managed delicately, first and foremost. We, of course, right now have a very interesting relationship with China. We have a financial relationship, we have trade deficit issues going on there, but we also look at China and we see all the things that need to be, because we're looking at a situation where there are major human rights violations going on all the time. For those of you who missed the New York Times piece a couple weeks ago about what happens with Apple iPhones, where are they made? They're being made in China right now. Why are they being made in China? Well, because China doesn't have the same type of collective bargaining rights that we have here in the United States of America, the same type of human rights that we have here in the United States of America, and they can put thousands of people in horrible living conditions, basically next to the factory floor, wake them up in the middle of the night, and have them go out there and work nonstop to put together the new type of glass that Steve Jobs wanted on his iPhone. So, what are we going to do about this? We need to continue to have a delicate relationship with them. We need to have open relations. We need to say that we're not going to stand for the human rights violations, but at the same time, we also need to focus on our economy here so we can start to pay down our deficit and not be beholden to the debts that we have tied into them as well.
Thank you.
China is now the second largest economy, and if we're thinking about creating jobs in our own country, we cannot ignore China in any way, shape, or form. And there are some major issues there. We've got to enforce safe labor standards so that American workers are not getting penalized. We're not getting penalized for treating our workers well and respecting labor laws and environmental regulations. We need to look at protecting American intellectual property. If you got any kids, you know this. You know, they're grabbing stuff off of Chinese sites. This is unfair to American companies that have created intellectual property. It's part of our heritage. We need to get a level playing field with China and make sure they follow the rules.
Thank you.
You know, China is our economic rival, but they're also an economic partner. We have a lot of trade with China that goes both ways. So I think when we do our exports, besides the technology we share, we should also work to export our democracy, our human rights, our labor values, and the environment. Also, we have to let China know that as they seek to protect their borders, they don't sneak and try to infringe on the borders of other Asian nations that are out there.
Thank you. So this is the last question on the formal part of the program, and this goes to Ms. Esty. Do you agree with the current timetable for troop withdrawals from Afghanistan? Why or why not?
If you look at the cost to our country in terms of lives lost over the last 10 years, it's hard to argue with the need to draw down troops. Let's remember, we are much safer than we were. You know, we have had way too many young men and women from Northwest Connecticut, from our district. A young man, Josh Budd, in Cheshire, who graduated with my son a year and a half ago, lost his leg last spring in a war that I think many of us think has dragged on way too long. We have eliminated bin Laden. We have seriously crippled Al-Qaeda. And it's time to really look at the needs here at home and make sure that our national security dollars are being well spent. Frankly, I think the situation in Syria and Iran and Pakistan remain probably as or more serious for us and our national security. So I do think we need to be drawing down. And as we do it, we need to look at making sure we have built institutional capacity to make sure that the Afghanis take over. They have got to own their country. They have got to be responsible. And frankly, the last couple of weeks have left some serious doubt about whether they're up to the task. But at the end of the day, we can't be an occupier force. They are going to need to take over, and we need to focus on what's going to be most important for our national security. And that includes, as I've said before, energy, energy, energy. We have got to get off our dependence, and that will help free up our resources to create jobs here in this country now.
Thank you.
Osama bin Laden's gone, the Taliban's on the run, our mission is finished. Bring our troops home now. When they come home, let's have a parade for our soldiers from Afghanistan and our soldiers from Iraq, and let's make sure they get a good GI Bill and a great education.
Mr. Roberti.
I've worked with far too many veterans who have come back from Afghanistan after serving multiple tours, after having served tours in Iraq before that. It is time we end our longest war. We need to bring our troops back. It's been said, we can't say it enough though. When we're talking about people who are heroically fighting our wars, we cannot say it enough. We need them home. We need them home now. We need them home safe.
Thank you. All of you have come up with a few more questions. We're only going to be able to get to about 3 of them by the time constraints, but I will say this, I'll bet you all these folks will take your questions afterward. So stick around. Much like my hero Tom Brady, I'm going to call an audible with the rules. And that is that each of you will have 1 minute to respond to the question. So you each have 1 minute, and timekeepers, you're on that, right? Good. All right, and who did we just finish with? Who kicked off the last? I forget. Ms. Esty did. So we'll begin with Mr. Donovan. The United States was once the leader in space exploration. Given all the benefits of the space program in terms of technological advancement, how do you envision the United States regaining the lead once again?
Well, you know, I was of the age when we heard about this spaceship called, or space satellite called Sputnik. And it really woke the United States up and said, you know, what are we going to do with our education system? We revamped it, and we sent men to the moon, and we developed a lot of technology and created jobs. Space made, what, the final frontier, as they say in Star Trek? Well, there's other frontiers as well. You know, I mentioned Jackson Labs. This is a new frontier in terms of curing diseases for Americans, for the world. This company plots individuals and designs medication to cure some of the diseases that we thought would be around forever. This is a new frontier for us. When we invest in Jackson Labs and bioscience, we will advance education, we will advance cures, and we will create jobs. That will be the new NASA. We'll say from years from now, remember when we invested in bioscience, we put a man on the moon, but we cured some of these most deadly diseases for our people.
Thank you.
I certainly support what's going on in Jackson Laboratories, but we also need to speak about what's going on with the space program right now. It's been drastically cut. We no longer have the ability as the United States of America to put people into space. And most of the technologies, or many of the technologies that we have today are thanks to the exploration done by the men and women of NASA. So we need to make sure we save NASA. We need to make sure we have the ability to send people into space. More importantly, we need to make sure we have the ability to have people on the ground here in America working on the technologies of the future. These are the things that are going to get us moving. This is the type of stuff that's going to be allowed to affect our travel right here in the United States. We talked about transportation earlier. Well, thanks to NASA, we may be able to get planes up higher and get around the world a lot faster in terms of just passenger travel. Thanks to NASA, we're able to have the type of things that allow the internet to work and allow all these things that we need in order to grow our economies, in order to make tomorrow a better place. We absolutely have to re-engage in NASA.
Thank you.
Space exploration, I think, is really essential to what it means to be an American. We push the boundaries. We search for the truth. We search for what's beyond our present knowing. Without the space program, you know what? You probably wouldn't have been able to get here tonight, because I learned last month GPSs rely on basic science that was developed in the space program. Things we use every day, our cell phone, things we don't think a thing about every day. We wouldn't have them if the US had not made a commitment to basic science and thought big about going into the beyond. I'm a little biased. My 19-year-old wants to be an astronaut still. He still has his Mars posters up in his room, but that is one of the things that is great about our country. We think big, and we ask big questions, and we look hard. And to give up on that now is about a shrinking of our vision as a people. It is wrong. I think we need to get back to embracing the search for truth, get into space, find what's out there, and you know what? We will reap the benefits right here at home. We always have, and we should.
Two more questions, still closing statements. This one is for Mr. Roberti. How will you encourage more students in the United States to earn hard science degrees and keep our nation competitive with those like China and India?
This all goes back to education. We need to make sure we are encouraging our students from a very young age to explore the sciences, to explore math. It's not just science and math, it's also music. These things are all connected. Lots of programs that we've changed how we do things. We started teaching to the test instead of teaching the real subjects that matter. The things that are going to be able to create tomorrow's scientists, tomorrow's engineers, tomorrow's mathematicians. And that is why we need to completely reevaluate not just No Child Left Behind, but our entire education system, early child education, because we're starting to learn that kids start to latch onto these things before they even get to kindergarten. And we need to encourage vocational schools afterwards, because some folks may not go on to the major engineering schools, but they may go on to vocational schools after that and allow them to flourish, and then maybe they go on after that into the engineering programs afterwards. It's fundamentally looking at how we educate our children, how we educate them all the way through the top.
Thank you very much. Ms. Esty.
The one thing I think we just need to say, it's important and we're going to make it a priority as a country. And there are ways we can do this. You know, we can have loan forgiveness that is greater in fields where we need special skills. We've done this in medicine. We've helped do loan forgiveness for people who get in and who become doctors and serve in underserved areas. We could use the power of the market to help relieve that crushing burden of student debt, to encourage kids to think like, well, maybe I would think about becoming an engineer if I know I'm not going to have any debt when I graduate from school. We can get scientists and engineers into the classroom and share their love of discovery hands-on. You know what, face it, most of us remember how boring those science classes were. Blah, 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 I point to the chart. Science can be exciting. And we need to treat it as exciting so that our kids understand this is about discovery. What kid doesn't like to get their hands dirty and play with stuff? We need to remember the joy of discovery and get it into our classrooms. Again, I think Germany has had a good model of supporting science and technology. We could learn from them. We could do better. We need to do better. Thank you.
Well, I was a biology major. I found science very exciting. And the mitochondria was quite entertaining. Yeah. But I think the main thing is we need to let kids dream about what they can do. You know, one of the problems is the burden of higher education really stops kids from having that dream. When I was a kid, I knew I could afford to go to college. I paid for college I got some grants, I got some loans, and I worked in the summers, and I worked at the drugstore on the weekend. You know what my parents provided for me? Room and board. I just had to do the dishes every night. We have to give kids to say, you know, there are jobs out there in engineering. There are jobs out there in science. There are jobs where you can work with computers, and you can go because we will make sure you go. We have an achievement gap right now because there are kids sitting there saying, hey, Dad, can we go to college? Dad says, no, we can't afford it. All right, well, I'm done. We have to say to kids, there are jobs out here. Look at the businesses we've created. Look at the people who are crying for engineers. We are going to make a pathway for you to be successful and these businesses become successful.
Thank you.